Welcome to the Guys Review, where we review media, products, and experiences. My name is Tucker. I'm your host tonight. Along with me this week is Chris and Daniel. Say hello, guys.
Hello.
Howdy.
Unfortunately, Stephen and Trey can't be with us. Stephen, I don't know, pulled a nut muscle or something, and Trey's on the toilet. I don't know.
No, Steven has stuff to do.
Yeah, he pulled a nut muscle.
And Trey has a kid who's probably teething right now. That's probably the main problem.
His kid's like 1.5. He's not teething.
How do you know? Have you looked at his teeth?
Well, seeing as how he ate chicken nuggets at his birthday
party.
Why
are you checking out little kids' teeth anyways? Somebody needs to do an investigation.
Because we were all there for the birthday party, and he was eating like chicken nuggets.
Teeth?
No.
You buy them on the black market?
Oh my God, I hate you so much right now.
Oh,
anyway, well, the movie we're doing this week was picked by Daniel, and it's the movie Mr. Brooks. But before we get into that movie, how's everybody's week?
Well, I'll tell you mine. I got a picture of Tucker when he gets older right behind me. There you go. It's Tucker.
Sadly, I think he has more hair color than I have.
Oh, he's got the
hair in general.
Hairline. Look at that. It's the exact same hairline. That's
I have more.
Court.
I have more hair. Hang on just a second, guys. I got a call from work coming in.
Oh, man. So you're already ruining this.
Right?
Hello?
God, I got to delete this.
Right.
Whatever all this stuff was.
I mean, we can all hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Where are you not?
Well, then.
He's on mute. He just put us on mute.
I mean, probably better off with the work thing.
How'd you do last year on your fantasy football?
Oh, I think we lost Tucker.
Did we really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sticking with this one. This is gonna be mine. There we go.
Nice.
I like it.
Every year I'm in Florida, you know, Tiger King works.
Yeah, there you go, man. Enjoy that. Wonder where you went to.
What was that?
I said, I hope you didn't have to go.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. He could probably still hear some stuff in the background, but
Yeah, I can't see him no more. Wherever he's at.
yeah.
I don't know how you put it. How do you see? It says he's still here.
Is it? No, he's
No,
completely
maybe not.
gone on
No,
mine.
it's just Steven on there.
Yeah.
You're right. Dang. Huh.
Yeah, participants 3, just as Steven. Oh, he just sent me a text.
What do you say?
Going into the office. Don't know when I'll be back.
Well, shit. How? Well, damn. So, like,
Either we can bullshit and go through the movie, or we can wait and do it later, or do it next week or something. I guess I don't know.
I don't know. Let's see here. Chris and Daniel. Let's see here. Let's see what it says.
Yeah, it's just me and you.
No, somebody just sent a message. Let me see here.
Oh, it was probably Tucker.
Let me see here. No, it's Steven, but I'm trying to see what he's saying.
Oh. And he didn't get to watch the movie, so.
Yeah. Damn. Who was going to read the thing? Were you going to read it, or was Tucker going to read the synopsis or whatever?
I was gonna read, if I could find it, from Wikipedia, but I think he might have been doing it too.
Oh shit! All right. Steven said, "Go ahead and go with it."
He said, "Go with it." All right.
Yeah.
Well then.
Do you still want to read it?
Yeah. We'll see how this goes. So the movie is Mr. Brooks. It's a 2007 is when it was released. It's an American psychological thriller film directed by Bruce Evans, starring Kevin Costner, Demi Moore, Dane Cook, and William Hurt. So it's a
to it, man.
Kevin. What's that?
It has an awesome cast to it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it's a. I love the movie personally. But so it follows Kevin Costner's character, Mr. Brooks, who's celebrated in Portland as a businessman. He owns a box factory, but he's also a serial killer that nobody knows about. So
I mean, most people who own box factories are serial killers. I mean, it
yeah,
makes sense.
Yeah, but
they make the cereal boxes, so it makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I think the only time it really shows him in the box factory doing anything, they're making a sake box. Yeah, so he's a respected businessman, Portland, Oregon. Secret life as a serial killer, which he's he's addicted to it. So he hadn't done it in a while, but he's got a Marshall who talks to him, who is kind of like his imagination. It's in his head. So at the very, at the beginning, it shows him he's getting this. You get the award, Businessman of the Year. Marshall's talking to him. They've been plotting already. Young couple, Yeah. So, man, the plot on this write-up is not good.
It's okay. We're getting the gist of it. So Marshall's
trying to do
one more kill.
Yeah, Marshall's trying to talk him into doing a kill as he's driving home from his celebration for Businessman of the Year in Portland. he's sitting there with his wife in the car, and he's yelling at him, no, I'm not going to do it. We're not going to do it. I'm done with this, that kind of stuff. And he finally gets into it, and he, looks over at his wife and he tells me, the food was great, but I wasn't impressed with the dessert. You want to get something sweet.
So I go get gelato.
They go get gelato, ice cream, whatever, and they're watching this young couple in the dance studio. Later that night, they get home. Marshall's still kind of talking to him, gets him into going to do it, tells his wife that he's still awake. He's going to go do some work in his studio, which he's got like a pottery studio that he works on, says he's going to play with glazes. And she makes the ref, tells him, all right, well, if I'm not awake when you get back, wake me, which is always a good thing.
Yeah.
And then he goes out, murders the young couple, breaks into their home, and catches them there having a little fun of their own. And that's I guess we'll stop there. We'll start from that entry. What you think from there?
All right, man. Well, I mean, like from the start and all, it starts off kind of slowish. With the whole ceremony, the whole speech and all that. Going through everything else, and you see Marshall in the back. In the beginning, you're just kind of like, who the heck is that guy that's behind him? Where has he been at? Who was that guy? And you don't really know what's going on at this point, of the movie and all. You're just kind of like, well, he wants to have fun. What kind of fun are they wanting to have, So, but, it's nothing better than planning and killing and eating some ice cream while you're at it, That's the way I would do it, too. I'm going to kill a young couple.
Yeah, it's definitely odd at the first because, like, you don't see Marshall at the ceremony. You don't see him there. And then they're driving home, and there's just this dude sitting in their back seat. And, it's the big difference I found even with the conversation when you kind of figured out that Marshall's like in his head, you figured out that there's a big difference between people who are like delusional psychotic where they're talking to someone, like everybody hears them talking to the other person. Like all the conversation with Marshall is literally just in his head. Every scene, as long as they are, it's always just them. No one else is ever aware that he's carrying on this other conversation.
But once you first watch this movie, you're sitting there like, why is his wife not saying anything? In the back seat?
Yeah, when I first, I guess we skipped over that part. You said this was the first time you watched it a couple days ago. I watched it probably a few months after it came out when it first like released onto like DVD and stuff. I randomly saw it and I looked it up and I watched it. And so, I mean, that was 2007. So it was probably 2008 when I watched it first. But yeah, no, at the first time, like I had no clue what was going on with that.
See, I don't know how this went over my head because I was a huge Dane Cook fan. Like during that time.
I want to think this was right after, I think Vicious Circle.
Okay.
Like this was early in his career. It's when he was really doing more movies and, he was right at that aspect. And I think that's one of the reasons I ended up seeing it was also because, he's doing this movie, Mr. Brooks. It's supposed to be more of a serious role. It's not just comedy. And so I'm like, okay. And I looked at it and I'm like, well, shit, it's got Kevin Costner and Demi Moore in it also. Like, this has got to be a definitely good movie. And
Demi Moore looks good too.
Oh yeah. That's never a bad thing to have. But yeah, it's getting even a little bit further on in the movie, right after he does that killing, you see Demi Moore and her partner and stuff. They come into the murder scene. And that's where we learn that, he's the thumbprint killer, what they said, because he always takes the thumbprints of whoever he kills and like puts them somewhere in their own blood.
Right.
And he poses the bodies. They said, we always pose the bodies and stuff. But during the killing, one thing that we also saw was that he left the blinds. The couple was screwing with the blinds open.
Yeah.
And he slammed the blinds shut. So they were kind of questioning that stuff as well. But that's where we see Demi Moore's character come in.
It's kind of interesting that she makes that suggestion about where the blinds left open or closed, and it's even himself. He was like, when he went in there to kill him, he was like, well, Marshall was like, what kind of sickos are these? Having sex with the blind open with all the people looking. And I guess in Demi's mind, she's one of those type of people who likes with the blinds open or something. That's the reason
very
why
possible.
I feel that way.
Well, it was odd in a sense too. As we go in more of the movie, you figure out that Demi Moore, like her detective character, like seems like specialized with like serial killers in a way, and even though she's a Portland detective, which just makes me not want to live in Portland because apparently they got a bunch of serial killers. But yeah, yeah, it's. I mean, I wouldn't want to live there anyways, but it's still. But yeah, no, it was that whole big thing. You know, we get more. As we go through it, as the next day, we end up having Mr. Brooks' daughter, Jane, comes home unexpectedly from college, meets him at his office. He goes into the office. And when he goes into his office, there is Dane Cook's character sitting on the couch in his waiting room. He goes in, talks to the daughter. Daughter says she's dropping out of school. She wants to take over the family business. He didn't go to college. Why does she? This kind of thing. That way that they don't have to sell it if he dies, and she can just stay in the family. One of the things I noted there that we see kind of later on that kind of plays a part, a combination thing, is she goes and she sits on his lap and she takes his glasses off and puts his glasses on her. And as they're going through that whole thing, he says, no, you get her a cab to the assistant. But the assistant comes in, hands him the envelope that Dane Cook had and said, he said, you need to see this. Is he a salesman or something? Don't know. He looks at the pictures, and he was taking pictures of the couple screwing, had the pictures of him killing him and standing in front of the window, blackmail him.
Right.
Dane Cook's character comes in. They have a conversation about what's going to happen. Tells him, I'm not shaking you down. I saw you in the paper, and so I knew who you were. And he wants to be taken along on a killing, despite Kevin Costner's character, Mr. Brooks, having that inner turmoil of I'm not doing this anymore. That was the last one, but now he kind of has to for this guy. So he kind of tells him, meet me here, and all this stuff, and we'll plan it essentially.
Right. Well, so his daughter coming in there, right, and putting on his glasses and sitting on his lap. Sitting on his lap and putting on his glasses. Now, I have a daughter of my own, and whenever she does that, it's kind of her way of saying, look, I look just like you. You get what I'm saying? So I think it's kind of a manipulation point that she was trying to make there by putting the glasses on him, trying to say, hey, look, I want to come in, get in your business, and eventually take over your business. I put on the glasses, you see me and you, or
yeah. Oh yeah. And I would say it's kind of like the little kid putting on their parents' shoes and trying to walk around in them, even. Exactly. Yeah, but it's one of those things. I don't have any kids, so I can't say anything like that. But but definitely it's one of those things where it's that manipulation of I want my way, which it already kind of seemed like earlier. The wife kind of said, I think she's going to drop out before we even knew anything. And,
right.
In here he's like, no, you got to tell your mom. You got to explain it to her. I'm not doing it for you, because it already kind of seems like with the daughter, he's the pushover. And he does anything the daughter wants already.
Well, of course, daddy's a girl. That would make sense.
Yeah, exactly. And he asked her where's the BMW? Where's her car? And she's like, oh, a friend's driving across country for me. And he's like, okay, whatever. Just kind of dismisses it. Gets her a cab, comes in, has a conversation with Cook.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it goes through that whole thing where it's we're believing it or whatever because we don't really know the background story of this little girl, and, everything about her and all. But it's interesting. So now you're at the point of Dane Cook bringing in the pictures.
Yep.
And they go and meet in the conference room that they're meeting in?
Yeah. He tells the assistant, go have him wait in the conference room and he'll meet him there. And that's where they have the conversation.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And it's funny that the whole time, are you about to go into this part? Well, I'll let you go into this part.
No, you're good. I'm kind of reading to see where this is at, because this thing on what I'm reading off of Wikipedia it's not even in the right order.
Oh my God.
It's kind of try to find the thing, but it's not even. There's really not even that much there. It's it really skips a lot of the movie.
Oh my God. So he's in the conference room and he's trying to get Dane Cook's trying to get him to take him under his wings to train him how to kill and be a killer. Yeah. And he's a little bit reluctant, but not, even though he knows that he could easily, take Dane Cook out and he knows he's got a PO box key. Already knows that. Already knows he can get all the pictures that he wants. He's already figured out what floor he's on, where he would have seen it from. So he's already got it all figured out.
Yeah, that night he actually breaks into Dane Cook's apartment while he's sleeping and does it, and that even goes back to Mr. Brooks as a serial killer, like how good of a serial killer and like how good he is at breaking in. Like we saw that when he was killing the couple. He breaks into the house. He has the little slide thing to take the little lock off the door. It shows him walking in a room at night, and there's like the phone cord that's blocking the way, and he just stops at it and then walks around it. Same thing. He goes into Dane Cook's. He wakes him up. He basically tells him, "I realized that there was a one-sided friendship," and all this kind of stuff. And says, basically bring all the photos in your memory card, with you tomorrow night. And then he leaves, and you don't see anything. Dane Cook jumps out of bed, runs through his place, turns on the light, can't find him, and then runs to the door and opens his front door, and he still has the chain lock on.
Right.
So like Mr. Brooks was able to break in without him knowing, wake him up at a dead sleep, and then get out and still like even relock the door with the chain before he could even get out of bed and run through his place.
Yeah, I wonder if they were ever going to bring that up, the relatch and all. I'm glad that they did, because this first one, they put so much emphasis on the whole him unlatching it and getting in. So I was wondering if when he left Dane Cook's place, would they show that? And I was so glad that they did, because it was like, all right, well, sweet. They're like saying, no, he can get out and relatch it back,
Yep. And it's curious. So even going back a little bit, when you first meet Demi Moore's character, she's like, I thought this guy was gone, or we'd already arrested him, because he's been gone for like 2 years. He hadn't committed a murder. And they're like, well, maybe it's a copycat. Well, no, they never talked about how he retrieved the slugs after he kills them. Which even going back to that murder, you saw him, he like put a plastic bag around his hand with the gun, and he zip ties it to his wrist so that he can collect everything. Like it really shows even him as a killer, like how careful and methodical he is on every step he takes on watching him from a distance, and then like the actual act of killing him, how careful he is, which even some of that shows with Marshall when Mr. Brooks first walked into the light. You see Marshall kind of like grab him, like pull him back, like what is this, and he like holds his hand out into the light. So it's like there's this constant like awareness away, but it really shows that element with him.
Oh yeah, even with the vacuum cleaner, like he even empties out the vacuum cleaner.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that really, but I started laughing. That's one thing I laugh about with this movie, because it's 2007, and they're talking about, I bet he vacuumed everything, and he took the bag out of the vacuum. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, 2007, I don't think many people had bagged vacuums anymore, because Dyson came out in like the mid 90s or something. So like canister vacuums were a big thing then. Like who had unless you were a hotel, you didn't have a bag vacuum.
Right.
Which was, so it was one of those things. I mean, there's people that probably still had them because they were.
That is kind of interesting you say that, because I think like in the early 2000s, I was probably, I had a roommate and all, and we had one of those wind tunnel vacuums, where you take the canister out and you just dump the canister. So it is interesting that they would have one of those that would, have the bag on it. Yeah, I don't know.
Especially because it was an older couple, or not an older couple, it was a younger couple. So it's like you would think about like that was something that was a little odd. But I mean, I get where they were going with it, and I don't know if they ever really gave you a time frame. I can't remember if they said what year Businessman of the Year or whatever he was, but I would assume it would be around the recent time that it was being made. But
yeah, it had to be, because I mean, they had the flip phones out. We saw that in the movie.
Yep.
So it's definitely, it was something that he was checking. We'll get to it later on, I'm sure. But there was something that he was checking, and it was like, oh yeah, that's more of a 2000 thing, like on his computer or something that he was looking up.
Yeah.
Text message. The girl I think she got a text message on her phone. The officer did or something. It was like, oh yeah, that's, up to date. So yeah.
Yep. Yeah. But yeah, it was. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in that first little bit when you really look at the detail. And for me, because I've seen the movie several times and stuff like that, so I still pick up little bits of different things. And even this time watching it, knowing that we're doing this, it was I was watching a little bit closer at some of the details, and like that's where I thought about the vacuum. I'm like, wait a minute, like you'd had a canister, not a bag. Like I don't even know. Yeah, not even a bag one, but
I don't know. Maybe that's something to review and look at, and I'll see if like when did the bag vacuums really go out? Style,
yeah.
you know,
I mean,
left.
I'm sure there was people that still had them, and I know that like for the longest time you had the door-to-door salesman still with like the bag vacuum. Oh, it was still so much better than anything else because it had the power. But I know they were still out there. I just don't imagine that many people still having them like that much. But yeah, no, as you know, as we go on too, you get a little bit more information about Demi Moore's character as the detective. That she's going through this divorce, and the guy wants a ton of money. So obviously, like she's a detective with a lot of money, and she's going through and she starts looking at that other building as well, and she's talking to a flight attendant who says that her roommate was there at the time, not him, who's a flight attendant not coming back. And then it shows her also catching Dane Cook's character leaving.
With the envelope.
Yeah, and so he's like, I think that's when he's leaving to go meet Mr. Brooks also.
Yeah. So first time he's meeting Mr. Brooks, right? In his car.
Yeah, in his car. Yeah, so he's supposed to go meet him, and you see her kind of like she notices in his apartment that he's got cameras, and he's like, no, it's just a hobby, stuff like that. Hands him the card, and then he goes out, and that funny scene to me is like when you see Mr. Brooks. One, he's this businessman, successful, all this stuff. He's like his daughter drives a BMW, but he has a separate car, this old crappy Volvo, that he drives just for this stuff. And it shows him sitting there with Marshall talking to him like, oh, there's Mr. Smith, which Dane Cook says to call him. And they're walking. He's like, oh, should we go over and pick him up? Or it's like, no, just beat the horn. Maybe a car will hit him and put not make all this go away. And they beep the horn. He comes out and almost gets hit by a car, which you kind of knew in a way. You kind of know with the movie magic, that was going to kind of happen.
Right.
Which was still, but it was still funny because they laugh and they cackle afterwards, and but they get in the car and they drive around, look for, and he tells them, pick out someone you'd want to kill. Kind of sets the ground rules. Don't make it someone stuff like that.
So you spoke of the building, and this is one of the things that just like, I don't know why, it just confused the crap out of me, like watching the movie a bit. Like you see Jimmy Moore outside the front of the Lay's house, and it's just a street with just houses. You know what I mean? It's like a neighborhood.
Yep.
But then I guess right in their backyard is just this major metropolitan city, like right behind their backyard. You get what I'm saying? Like it's like their house just touches.
Oh yeah.
On the city. It just throws me off because it's like, it looks like a small town, but then it looks like a big town. What are we doing here? Like I don't know. Small towns like that.
Yeah, I've never been to Portland, but from friends and stuff like that and things. I mean, I know it's a city, like it's a major city, so I assume that there's areas that are just homes. But yeah, I can't imagine that you have like this home that's right there. They got this huge bedroom window and stuff, and then there's this, because they said that eventually you learn that Dane Cook's character lived on the 4th floor. So it's like this is at least 3rd, 4th floor, whatever. It's several floor apartment building right next to an actual house, which didn't look like it was like an old shoddy house either. So yeah, it's kind of weird where the way it's like it's just everything would be positioned, and the way that you look at Mr. Brooks, like you can't imagine him going and committing a murder like this, like in this big multi, like a regular apartment,
right?
Where it's he's going to shoot through a wall and it's probably going to go through and hit the neighbor too, kind of thing. So it's the area is kind of mixed. Like it makes it feel like it's the house is more in the suburbs, and then, well, wait a minute, this apartment building is right here, which would be more like a city.
Yeah, it kind of threw me off a little bit. I was like, I'm not grabbing. It was just at the very beginning, whenever she first got to the house, the police scene. I'm just like, wait, though, there was the big, skyrise was right behind it there, and it was like, how is that right behind it? And, and then you just got this nice little neighborhood right there. I I don't know. The idea came across my mind, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you do have that and all. We
I mean,
Go ahead.
I know that they're like across the street from where I'm at. My area is developing a lot, and like there's an apartment building complex being built across the street. Like I live on like a 6-lane road outside of my community, and then there's like apartments being built across the way, and like a little bit up the way there's homes there, but there's like a good bit of space in between those. So they're not like right on top of each other where someone with a camera would be able to just, going straight into your bedroom window either.
Right.
So I could see it possible, but I don't find it possible.
Right.
Yeah, for that. That's a good thing. I never even really thought about that, about like the home and then the high rises.
It just threw me off for a minute there, but I mean, so she almost catches him right there, right then and there. She almost had, the thumbnail or the thumbprint killer and all right there. When he dropped that envelope, she would just open the envelope up, would have seen it and known. Like, of course, that would have ruined the movie. That would have been the end of the movie credits roll.
Oh yeah,
But,
movie magic done. 30 minutes in.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have said, detective. She picked it up. She couldn't have just opened it and looked in it. It wouldn't have been admissible because he, that kind of thing. But at that point, she'd have been like, "Oh, well, I know who the killer is. I'm just going to go investigate him."
Right.
But yeah, it's as you go through it, moving back in, it's like you see where she's going through the divorce. The guy wants a bunch of money, and then you also hear about the other serial, like I mentioned, the other serial killer that she's put away. Like the hangman Meeks has escaped from prison, as well, and so that's the guy, her ex-husband's thing of like, why did ask for what was asking for like a $1.5 or something at the time. So it's like to get out, and then she's like, it would make me really happy if you got hit by a bus. So you get a lot of that stuff through. You go through, her boss's question her about being on desk or whatever they need to do. Her attorney, I think, is asking her about being using her father's influence. She's like, no, I don't want anything from him.
Yeah.
So obviously, her father is someone really influential with a lot of money that you kind of learn.
That's about the time that Mr. Brooks finds out her wealth and all that.
Yeah. So that night when Dane Cook gets there, he gives him the card and says, "This is the detective looking for you." So they do the research. He does research on her as well, of like, and I think you have that scene where he's sitting at the computer, Googling her and looking her up, and it's like, well, maybe maybe she has daddy's money, or maybe he's the kind of father that leaves all his money to the opera, and and then they find out, they dig more, and he's like, nope, the opera didn't get much. So, there's that whole dynamic. They kind of learn more about her, and it's like, you kind of see how Mr. Brooks is like starting to admire her for doing her own thing and not, just leeching off a daddy.
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot there with her dynamic. So you have all that with her, and I really like the character like development. Like, you have a lot of backstory about these main characters as well, with Mr. Brooks and the detective. Really kind of gets into it. But you saw in that night when he was driving around with Dan Cook to pick someone, there's the truck that cuts him off, and he's like, "Fuck you, you asshole! This guy's an asshole!" And you see Marshall like, maybe Mr. Smith wants to kill the man in the truck, or the driver of the truck. Yeah. And so he makes a suggestion. He's like, well, what if it's a woman? Are you okay killing a woman? He's like, well, an asshole's an asshole. And it's the guy. He makes him, yeah. And then they follow him around. They get his license plate, and he's like, oh, I got it. I memorized it. And he's like, write it down. And he, whips around into the parking lot, and he makes him repeat it, and he like completely forgets. He's like, I know it's Oregon. And then writes down this. Yeah, because it had a tree on it. So yeah, there was a lot there with it.
Yeah, it was a good moment. All like the it's showing the details there that Mr. Brooks pays attention to.
Oh yeah,
and the thing that he looks out, like, because he's driving the truck doesn't necessarily mean that he's the owner of the truck. Are you going to kill him because he's if he's the owner, or if he's do you want to kill the driver, or do you want to kill the owner?
Yeah,
it's the same.
Yeah, there's definitely it's one of the things that I really liked about it was, like, you see some of these serial killer movies or something like that, and it's like it makes it like there's such a good like mastermind killer, but it's like, dude, like what are you doing like in your planning versus this is like he's really detail focused about every little thing with it. um and it was going through, and then we see, as you move in more, you see where she gets kidnapped by Meek, girl that's helping him.
Right.
um and she ends up getting, this is one of the scenes too. I look at they're in like the old panel van, kidnapper van, obviously. He tackles her, gets her in the van, and um, I can't remember. She hits him or something like that, and tries to escape. And then he, puts a gun to her head, and she kind of like, go ahead and shoot me. And the entire time that she's like hauling ass driving away, that door just stays open.
Yeah.
Never moves, never anything, just stays open. And then she
the DeLorean going on there. I hear you.
I got some messages coming in. But and then she starts pulling the chick's hair as she's driving, and she's hitting cars left and right. And all of a sudden I can't remember, she hits something else, and all of a sudden Demi Moore goes flying out of the van, smashes into a windshield, and as you see the van drive away. Yeah, the door had to be open, but then as soon as they keep driving away, the door closes. And you see that van door close all of a sudden. So it's one of those movie magic. Like it had to stay open for her to escape.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was one of those things. So obviously now there's the concern. You see her getting her head sutured up in there, and they're talking to her like, well, now this other detective is with you permanently. They go through all that.
Yeah.
And, so they're talking about it, and they're trying to talk about like the chiropractor that used to give him steroids, and how they've had his line tapped for a while. But even going past that, you see the next night where Mr. Brooks and Mr. Smith are stalking the guy at whatever convenience store or whatever he's working at, and then all of a sudden Meeks and this chick pulls up, and they realize that he realizes that's who it is. Yeah, they were going through the file of her, of like what she had done, and then seeing
he would have never known about the hangman being that guy if it wasn't for the fact of him going through and searching the computer on her and who all she has caught.
Yeah, though it was that famous case. Plus, there was just in the news that he had escaped.
Right.
So like they knew him, and that leads another good conversation with him and Marshall of like, Marshall, where do I know this guy? Where do I know this guy? I know him. And he's like, oh, you should really pay more attention. And points it out like, oh, that's the hangman. And so it's like Marshall is almost like his memory and everything. And like I think it was even the scene where they're sitting there and they're watching him, and he's doing a crossword puzzle, and Marshall's like helping him do the crossword puzzle.
Yeah, he's saying yeah. It's like a little database to it. Yeah, he knows stuff that he doesn't know. And then at this point, he says, "Hey, I don't want to kill that guy anymore." And you're starting to think in your head, "Oh, he's going to kill the hangman. That's who he wants. That's who he wants Mr. Smith to kill." Yeah. That's what's going on in your head. You're like, "Oh, they're going to plan on getting him and all." Because I mean, to me, at this point in the movie, I think probably anybody who's probably watched this movie, you don't fall in love with Mr. Brooks, even though he's the villain of the whole entire thing. You're like, dude, Mr. Brooks is just awesome. I'm in love with this character. And it's like you're sitting there thinking like, all right, he's going to turn around and he's going to be kind of the hero at the end, and
it's one of those odd movies where you root for the villain, like you root for the bad guy, you root for the killer. Like it's not like a regular serial killer movie or something like that where you're rooting for the police officers to like stop the guy from killing people. It's like, nah, man, I want this guy to kill people. It's like it's almost like Dexter.
Dexter, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, you're like that, and it's even though he's not killing just like bad people, but you see him in this scene, he's like, oh, like you said, you think he's gonna go like, we're gonna kill Meeks, like that's who we're gonna kill, like we're gonna do like the girl who's hunting us, we're gonna do her a favor and kill this guy, and then there's also the conversation back and forth.
Yeah, you're watching the movie and you're thinking in your head, you know what, he's going to end up killing Meeks, and she's going to be there or something. Somehow he's going to tie it together. Or she's there. He's going to kill Meeks, and then she's going to figure out he's a thumbprint killer. But then she's going to be like, "Oh, you killed him. I'll let you go. You know what I mean? Like
saves her
I'll
life
let
or something. Yeah.
Right, exactly. That's
Yeah.
what I don't know in your mind, but that was what was in. You watched this movie a long time ago, but
Yeah.
that's what was going on in my mind. Was that okay? This is how this movie's going to end. You know?
Oh yeah, yeah. Definitely the first time I'm like, there's gonna be some way that he's gonna kill Meeks and like kind of disappear for her or do something.
Yeah.
And so it was really odd in that sense, like thinking of what was going to happen and seeing that whole play together. And
We'll get to that.
there's a good scene there too, though, with Marshall and him going back and forth of like, oh, I know what you're thinking. This is crazy. This is whatever. And he's like, you don't know what I'm thinking. So it's like, again, there's like, it's almost like even though Marshall is a figment of his imagination, it's like it's still like they're two separate brains.
Right. Yeah.
And so they're like he's arguing about that, like you don't really know what I'm going to do yet, which to me that was also a like maybe that's not what he's going to do. So it made me doubt what he was actually planning. Like, is he just going to kill Meeks? Is he going to is he going to do something else? What's going to happen there? And at one point with that banter, I think originally I was like, well, maybe he's gonna hunt this guy down and he's gonna tip her off on him to get her like off his trail.
Right.
And then that way when he commits the next murder, she's like, well, crap, I was too busy hunting this guy that came after me to worry about the case I was already working on. Because by this point you also saw her lead tell her that, I'll buy you like 2 or 3 days until the feds get involved with it.
Right.
So it's like, oh, well, now she's going to get thrown off the case and this new team of feds are going to get involved. And by that point, he's already going to have done the next murder with Mr. Smith and have like, basically they're just going to disappear.
Yeah. So at this point, he's done dropped off Mr. Smith, right? And we're at that point. He's done. Mr. Smith was pouting when they left. He's dropped off Mr. Smith, and Mr. Smith slams the door when he gets out. And I noticed something. Marshall said something about, I don't like that. I wouldn't even like that guy if he was, what do you say, like charismatic and funny, or charming and fit. Which is funny because when you think of Dane Cook, that's like the characteristics of him.
Oh yeah.
Most people find about him is that he's charming and that he is funny at the same time, and is your part of you hates him sometimes. And, that's, I mean, he pretty much, it was funny that it was kind of foreshadowing, actual Dane Cook's character, who he is like in real life,
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, you think about the other movies that Dane Cook has done, like Good Luck Chuck or Employee of the Month or something like that. Like, like he's this charismatic guy. Like that's what he was playing in every movie. Versus just his stand-up where it was a super finger and his general comedy. So like the movies that he was rolling, that's what he was. He was the funny, charismatic, guy.
Exactly.
And
it's
this
just funny
one,
that Marshall made a reference to that.
Oh yeah,
it was pretty funny.
Breaking the fourth wall on us.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, it was definitely good. I think we might have skipped it, but there was another part too with the daughter, where I think right after she first got home, we find out that she says, I dropped out of school because I'm pregnant.
But that's not why I dropped out of school.
Yeah, and well, she ends up saying that's not why I dropped out of school. But you find out that she's pregnant, and they have this whole big scene about what they're, if she's going to keep the baby or whatever, and there's that whole big thing where he's like, no, you're going to keep it, and then the mom is like, wait a minute, hold your horses, you don't get to just deem what's happening here. And he kind of corrects it of, well, what I'm saying is we would love to have a grandchild.
Right.
And then they kind of go through, and you end up seeing a detective from Portland show up with a detective from was it Palo Alto, where she was at school in California, about a murder that happened at her school a few days before she returned.
With the bloody
with the bloody hatchet. And they go into the detail, and they're talking to this, and this really, I completely forgot about the scene. It really reveals a lot, because there's a lot to it there, where she's talking about, well, where's your car? And she says it's stolen. And Mr. Brooks is sitting in the back the whole time like, oh shit, because she told him that someone was driving it across. So they leave. She says she doesn't feel good. She's going to go upstairs. The mom follows. And then you have this scene with Marshall and Mr. Brooks in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And, they're talking about, oh my God, she did it. Why didn't she remember that she told me a friend was driving it across country? God, I hope she drove it into a lake, whatever. And there was
She was trying to
something,
tell me.
yeah, she was trying to tell me there's a whole big like inner turmoil with Mr. Brooks. And something that I really noticed with this was at this point, Marshall was like a voice of reason. He's like, maybe you should just let her go to jail. You shouldn't cover this up. You've always taken care of her,
Yes.
that stuff. And he's really going back and forth about it. And one thing I really noticed about this was, and I don't know if it was on purpose, if it's just the way that it was shot, but Mr. Brooks goes down and like he's sitting down on the floor at this point and they're talking. And the entire time you've seen Marshall before, he's kind of like in the shadows and this. And
Yeah.
at this point, he's got like the brightest amount of sunlight on his face, just lighting him up. And I don't know if that's supposed to be like he went from like the demon on the shoulder to an angel on the shoulder kind of thing. Of like, he's the voice of reason here. All of a sudden, like, you shouldn't cover this up because you don't know what she's gonna do now. And it's going back and forth. You don't know what he's gonna do. I think this is right about the point that we're at too, because they're going through all this, and then he kind of decides like he needs to take care of it. And then you see him go upstairs. He's at night. He's got his glass of milk. He drinks it and then goes up and he tucks her in, gives her a kiss at night, and says, "I'm glad you're home." When she first got back too. And then the next day in the office, he's telling his assistant, "I'm taking the rest of the day off, cancel my meetings. I'll be in my studio if you need me. I probably won't answer."
Right.
And then he moves his furnace out and he's got like the secret safe of like all his passports and fake identities, and just going even more into the how methodical and plotting he is of everything he does.
Yeah. No kidding.
And one thing I noticed about that was the IDs, the fake IDs and stuff that he had. Every one of them they were grouped in twos. So he had two of each one, like they were together, like they weren't just in a stack. There was like two open, all together.
Oh, God. All right.
And so it was something little like that I never thought about. But then, as you go forward, you see him. He gets on a flight. He's all dressed up like a completely different person. Flies out, flies back, and you see him come back that night, and he's like dressed like an old man with a cane.
Yeah.
So it's like you see this, and you know that it shows him in the car, and he's driving. He's got the hatchet in there, so you know what he's going to do. So yeah, there's a lot right there with his daughter and everything. So another thing I really liked about it is it wasn't just one dimensional about him as this killer of like just this. It showed him as the killer, the family man, everything.
Well, it was great too that like he goes there on the flight looking like this guy, like the facial hair and everything else. When he lands, I'm sure he went to a hardware store. He probably whatever he probably had something where he showed to him. So now you're thinking in this town, he started up this serial killer in this town. Because I bet he bought that from somewhere somewhere nearby to where they're going to be like, oh, the killer had a beard and, all this other stuff. And then the great part was like when he's leaving, I guess he stopped somewhere, changed clothes, became an old man, took the identity of an old man. So now it's like everybody just thinks that, that killer is in this town. So he created that killer in that town. Like it's pretty awesome. When you start thinking about it, like just like, he all of a sudden just at one time created a serial killer for that town.
Oh yeah, it's like there's never, with all the flights he takes, there's never a record of him, Mr. Brooks, leaving or going. And there's no record of the other person leaving and going either. Like it's like a one-way flight one way and then a one-way flight the other way. Two totally different people. There's nothing to connect there between it.
Right.
So it was a interesting play the way he did it. It wasn't like he just disguised himself as someone else the entire time.
Right.
So
That's
it
pretty
it
cool.
really goes back, even like we were saying about him being so methodical about like what he does and how he does it and plans it. Um, but then he comes back and he tells his daughter, he's like, "Yo, there was another murder at your school," and you see this like shocked look on her face, like, "What do you mean?"
Yeah,
um, and I think at that point she even has. I don't think she fully knows, but I think she suspects that he did something.
yeah,
Because it's kind of like, oh, there was another one. Oh yeah, it was exactly the same. Hatchet and everything. It's like it was left at the scene. So it's like, she's like, oh, like, because she's shocked because he knows that she did it, and now she's like, oh, wait a minute. So
I want to know what's going on with her younger, because earlier you were talking about her, him being on the when he gets up from fussing and all, he's like, she's just like me, and Marshall says, you're always having to clean up her mess.
yeah,
So I wonder what messes she's made, in the past. Has she killed people's dogs? Has she,
yeah,
like, is there certain things about her that's just reeks of a serial killer to herself?
yeah,
Um,
yeah. You think about it. Everyone always talks about that, like with kids who are really mean to animals and abuse animals and kill animals and stuff like that, like for fun. How like that's a serial killer, or like
yeah,
that's how they become serial killers, kind of thing. It's like, was that what she was doing, or was she just this hot-headed, always in a fight kind of kid?
right. I mean, that's
Um,
true. She may have beaten up some people before, and some other girls or something like that, and left them into a pretty bad shape, and he's had to figured out how to cover that up.
yeah, yeah. So it's yeah. There's that you don't know what kind of messes she's been in. I mean, it could be as something as her speeding around town and getting tickets, or it could be, like you said, it could be her killing someone's animals, or beating people up. We don't know. I mean, obviously she's a tiny thing.
Right.
Even in the movie, I mean, she's the actress is she also played in the TV series for The Flash.
But
It's
this
the
year,
same actor. Yeah,
okay,
she's Caitlin Snow. In there, she's the scientist. She's the female scientist, same girl.
okay, gotcha.
Um, but yeah, it's um, an interesting play there. You don't really know what's going on because without that line that you mentioned, like she seems like just a normal good girl kind of thing. And um, at one point, to me, I was thinking she killed the guy, and it was probably the guy that got her pregnant. Is what I was thinking. Um, but you also hear her talk about, oh no, the guy that got her pregnant is married with 2 kids and everything
Right.
else. So, and he wants nothing to do with me. So it's kind of like that even brings up to me too. I'm like, was she screwing a professor? you know,
I mean,
um,
that's a
again,
possibility. And then again, you're like you said in your mind, you're sitting thinking, is it the guy that she slept with? Well, I mean, if it was the professor, and maybe there was something going on with her getting kicked out of school or something like that, so she killed him. There's no
yeah.
point. We don't really get too much of a background too much on her.
Yeah, I think they said it was a student that got killed. So it wasn't
Yeah,
like it wasn't a professor, it wasn't someone older. Like, you think about it in a way, like maybe like putting a random story together that, we can't say, but maybe it was like she was screwing a professor, got pregnant, and someone found out and was going to turn them in.
yeah.
So
So she got rid of him.
she got rid of him. Like she, got a hatchet and chopped him up in the night, and then was like, oh shit, now what do I do? I'm running home to daddy. You know.
All right.
So
So
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff there.
So at this point, like before he ever went on the flight, he had sent a message out to Mr. Smith, on the newspaper saying that he wasn't going to be able to make his same time tomorrow night, and Mr. Smith the whole time is being followed by the detective, and
Yeah.
of course he comes up on him, and he almost came this close to ratting out, Mr. Brooks,
Yeah.
but he sat there and thought about it. Got to be smart, not stupid,
Well, and that's the very last thing that Mr. Brooks had in that paper was "Don't be stupid." So it was like kind of warning him, don't do something, and it was just kind of setting up for her to knock on the window and startle him as he's like throwing a temper tantrum in there.
Yeah,
Um,
breaks his
but
mirror.
yeah, oh yeah, he fixed his mirror and he did all that, and she tries to bait him out to like, oh, what were you, an amateur potter? Which is funny that she says that because that's what Mr. Brooks is doing.
Right.
his
Yeah.
the pottery and the glazes and all. He's like, no, and it kind of shows you that he is a smart guy. I can't remember what kind of engineering. He said he's an engineer, and so he is a smart guy because he immediately recognizes what she's doing and calls her out on it as well. That
Yeah.
no, I told you I was this, and whatever, and I feel like you're harassing me or something. So he kind of like calls her out right away. But she has this like hunch, and like she really feels like there's something about him, because I think at this point she'd also talked to the roommate, flight attendant, who
Yeah.
basically told her, "Yo, you should talk to this guy because he's told me about the awesome pictures he's taken of the couple making love." So at that point, like she knows that he knows something, just not what it is.
Right.
Yeah. So I feel like there's so much in this movie that
Well, no, she
little
hasn't talked to
things.
the flight attendant yet. There's a reason why. She talked to the first flight attendant that said,
Yeah.
yes, windows are open. Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. She talked to the first one, but not the second one yet. Because on the second one, she gets a search warrant after that. Whenever she
Okay.
finds out that he said, because the second flight attendant says, oh, you should talk to, well, it's not Mr. Bramblett or whatever his name is, Bramblett.
Yeah.
He said you should talk to him. He said he had all these pictures of him, and then she
Yeah.
was like, "I need a search warrant now."
Yeah, that's right. Well, no, I think the search warrant though was for the chiropractor, because then it shows them raiding the chiropractor's office, which I don't know if this is just an Oregon thing or what, but you go into that when they go into that chiropractor's office, like this looks like a crack house or something. Like the windows were like painted red, and it was all dark and nasty in there. I'm like, look, if I was going to a chiropractor, I showed up there, I'm getting the hell out because like I'm about to get tetanus and a bunch of other shit. But yeah, they go into they go through the place, they don't find anything, they go in and they see where it's like it's been ransacked of all the steroids that were there. And then that's when you see the hangman's thing. The body comes swinging down, like hung up in a chair when the door went all the way back. It, like released it, knocks her back, and there's the body with a note with a bunch of needles stuck in it that says "ha ha ha ha."
Yeah.
As well. So like, yeah, there's a lot going on there.
Yeah,
But I think it was she talked to the second stewardess, and that was the hunch why she was following him.
Right.
Why she was following Mr. Smith. I can't say his real name, the real name that he had there, but
we'll just keep calling.
Yeah, I think after. Yeah, Mr. Smith is a lot easier. Well, it's weird because even though Mr. Brooks, like in that first scene that we talked about, broke into his apartment, like Mr. Brooks obviously knew his real name at that point.
Yeah, of course.
Did his research, knew his real name, but he continues to call him Mr. Smith the entire time.
Yeah.
So, and even Marshall always refers to him, well, Mr. Smith is this, whatever. So it's definitely interesting, but yeah, as you go through there's all these little things that kind of connect and play together within the movie, which I think it really makes it, like they said, it said it's a psychological thriller, like in a sense that it really makes you think and piece together all the little things, but then there's the multiple kind of twists and storylines that go along with it.
Yes. But I kind of like the fact that he still calls him Mr. Smith, because then it shows that he doesn't have that personal connection with him. Once he starts knowing his real name, if he starts calling by his real name, it's kind of like he now has that personal connection to him and all. And it's like, hey, this is still just business, and that's how he's treating it as.
Oh,
so
yeah,
he
definitely.
Calls Mr. Smith. He's like, Mr. Smith, this is still business,
Yeah.
So, all right, so he gets back in town. He lets Marshall know about his real plans, which is...
Yeah, he starts talking to Marshall about the plan of having Mr. Smith, because he doesn't want to be this person anymore, doesn't want his... Mr. Brooks doesn't want his family to find out who he is in this horrible way and get caught and all this. So he's formulating a plan for Mr. Smith to kill him and to make him disappear as well. And they're having this conversation. Well, Mr. Smith isn't smart enough to do this. He can't do it. Well, obviously, I'll have to plan it for him. And there's the whole big thing where Marshall is like, I don't like this because I like living. I like fucking. I like, he goes on
he
and all this. Yeah, it's like and even that, he's like, I like fucking. It's like, you remember at the one point after they do the first murder, he
Yeah.
tells them, like, it shows the scene where he's in there burning the photos. He's not keeping anything. He's in the furnace. He's butt ass naked. Again, showing how meticulous he is about everything he had that night gets burnt.
Yeah.
And it shows him that, and he's like, all right, now do this, and then go upstairs and make love to your beautiful wife. And it's like, all right, now with this scene, you go back to that, and you think about it, it's like, all right, Mr. Marshall's sitting there watching fucking his wife every time and getting off on it on his own as well, because he's like, I enjoy fucking. I like this. Like, wait a minute. So that might even bring in a kind of a me, myself, and Irene vibe, where it's like Marshall takes over in it kind of thing. So it's there's a lot that, there.
Get the big dildo out.
Oh yeah. You just why is my ass hurt? He's like, that you did that to yourself. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff, and it all intertwines. It really makes you think, and now even talking about it, you remember more and more.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he does all that, and we go to that night. At the end here, you see him. He picks up Mr. Smith. They're riding in the car. Mr. Smith is really nervous. Doesn't really know where they're going yet. You don't know where they're going yet because you don't know if he's going to kill Meeks, if he's going to go kill the guy that cut him off. Like, what's he going to do? We don't know.
You don't know now. You're confused. Yeah.
Yeah, we just know that they're going to commit a murder, and Marshall makes the comment of like, he has his gun. I smoke gun oil, and he's like, yes, Mr. Smith is going to kill us, and they're like, well, yes, I know, but I'm hoping that him seeing us kill someone gets him to bring up the nerve to actually do it.
Right.
So it's kind of showing even more of like, he's got to see someone. He's got to get the thrill of seeing someone get killed again to build up the nerve to kill me.
Yes.
And then we see them, and they go in, and they're in this really nice, fancy, apartment, and like there's a huge wine rack back there, and they're kind of walking around, and then all of a sudden you hear a doorbell ring, and they hide behind the wine rack. Well, even as they're coming in, Mr. Smith looks at him, and this was a little bit of the comedy to me. He's like, Mr. Smith was like, I've got to take a massive shit, as they're going into the place. He's like, well, hold it. But then they go into the wine rack.
Quick, yeah.
Yeah. They go.
Point, you're right at a certain point, because you still, even though they're there, you still don't know that they're there, because you see earlier where in the alleyway with the hotel, you see where not Mr. Smith, Mr. Brooks found where the other serial killer was at. Meeks was at.
Yeah, he finds out where Meeks is at. Yeah.
So you're still at this point, like, well, I mean, are they going to go kill Meeks and then he's going to get himself killed? It's like you don't know that who he's really about to really kill until just now. You had your thoughts originally, probably.
Oh yeah. My thoughts once I saw the place that they're at, I'm like, this can't be Meeks. Meeks is this like steroid freak with this, super gothy emo chick. Like, you don't expect them to be in this like super high rise building with a bunch of wine racks and stuff, unless of course there's another dead body somewhere already. That sure. I would assume if that was it, you would have seen that. But you hear the doorbell ring, you hear him hide, and then that's where we find out that it's actually the detective's ex-husband and attorney are meeting, which takes an even more of a twist, because then you find out that they're screwing each other too.
Yeah.
And they're talking about how much money they're going to get out of her, because even though she tried to settle for the 1.5, they upped it to like 3, and so like there's this whole big thing going on there, this battle between them. And then as you're seeing, Mr. Brooks obviously kind of sits and lays weights, and he's waiting for the right time to come out, and they're sitting there, and you see Mr. Smith pisses himself.
Yeah.
Or like he just dripping down. He's like, what the fuck? Like, I'm here with a noob.
Yeah, he kind of turned his head to the side, like, what are you doing?
Really? Come on, kids. Pee before we leave.
Or was that just one of those moments where, we'll find out later. We'll get to that later on. Just keep going. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. But so it's you see all that, and then Mr. Smith moves like to get a better view of them screwing. And it's an apartment. It's like a big high rise like studio or like loft, whatever, and hardwood floors in it. And obviously he moves and the floor squeaks. And the attorney's like, "Are we alone?" And he's like, "Yeah." And obviously, Mr. Brooks again gives him this look of like, "You fucking idiot! Like, what are you doing?" And so at that point, Mr. Brooks steps out and, he does his line the first time we saw him do the young couple. Same thing. He just kind of walks and goes, "Hello," and, startles them. And I think it's always funny because the woman always screams and he's like, "Don't do that." It's like, he always tells them, "Don't do that," kind of thing, which I find personally funny because, like, someone started screaming because there's someone in their house. You see they got a gun in their hand with a bag around it already. It's like, you tell me no, don't scream, it's not going to make me stop.
Right.
But he does that, and then he beams her in the head, shoots her, and shoots the ex-husband as well, and kills him. Which is interesting. One thing I find there is, he says that he retrieved the bullets, and when if I'm remembering it right, that scene, that apartment was like all glass windows on the other side.
Right.
So unless the bullets, like, in the first killing, he shoots them like great accuracy right in the forehead, right in the middle, and it goes right through their heads into the wall behind them. This time, if the bullet was that same thing, went right through their skulls, right through their heads, it just went out a glass window.
Yeah.
Now,
you're right.
You also think, though, with those high-rise buildings, those windows are, super thick, but I can't imagine they're bulletproof. So
I think so. I guess it's one of those just like, speculation. I mean, just have to, movie magic,
Yeah, it's movie magic, but it's some of the questions I ask with it because it's been really good up to this point of like all the little details of what he's doing and how he's doing it and, everything else. So you just think about that. I mean, for all we know, he's using a different gun with a smaller caliber that isn't gonna go through, or he's using a hollow point, or he's using something something else that's not gonna go through as hard. So who knows? But yeah, so they do. He does that. They kill him, and then we go and we see them driving away, and you see that's when Mr. Smith, he's all happy, he's all pumped, he's ready to go, and then you hear Marshall, he's like, "Here comes the gun," and he pulls out the gun on him, and then they have this whole conversation of like, take this exit. No, I'm not going to take it. And he just keeps going, speeds way up. He's like, "I'm doing 80. You're going to shoot me, really?" He's like, "You need to plan this out better," and he puts it together for him.
Yeah.
And I think at this point, I think we actually jump back to the detective, and it shows her going to Mr. Smith's apartment.
It's empty.
And it's empty. It's totally empty. Nothing there except a balled up piece of paper from the moving company. And there's an address, and it's like, this is where they're taking their stuff. And it's the partner shows up. She was alone, and then the partner shows up, and she like pulls her gun on him, and he informs her that your ex-husband has just been killed. Where were you? It's like, I was at home sleeping. All this stuff. So there's this huge thing now where she's a suspect of that murder, and she ends up, she like just basically decks the guy in a way with her gun or whatever. And,
yeah.
Pulls her gun on him, and it's like, it's better you with me at this point.
Yeah, on her.
Oh yeah, it just kind of walks out, and then she leaves there too. But yeah, it's really interesting. You see that address where all his stuff is, and then she shows up there and finds Meeks, which is the twist too. To where we're going back, we were talking about, well, who's he going to kill? Now we know who he kills. Where was the Meeks thing coming in?
There it is.
He found the address and sent all of a moving company with all of Mr. Smith's stuff to the address that Meeks was at. And they have their whole they have this big shootout, and they go through, and ends up Meeks kills the girl and himself when they're caught.
Yeah. A murder-suicide.
Yep. So it was there's a lot going on there, and it's really cool because we find you find the twist. You finally find out what Mr. Brooks was planning all along.
Yes.
In that sense. And
Nothing was not planned out by Mr. Brooks this whole entire time.
oh yeah, every single thing that happened the entire time with Mr. Smith, with everything, he had a plan. And it was like, you see it, you think about it back now to the very first time he saw Meeks. It's like he started making this whole plan of Mr. Smith killing him and, you know, basically putting her to Meeks and everything.
Yeah.
So like there was that whole big thing. You didn't know what was going to happen, which was really interesting. I mean, the firefight scene was something. I mean, there's a lot of bullets, a lot of shooting out lights, and again, incredible accuracy to be able to shoot out everything on the first try, and then shooting down the stairs and hitting them in the legs and all that stuff. But there was a lot going on, and then we go back to Mr. Brooks and Dane Cook going into a cemetery.
Right.
And he's like, here, use the key. He's like, why do you have a key to a cemetery? He's like, I own it.
Right.
It's like there's two things that everyone is always going to need, and it's like cemeteries and something else. I can't remember what it was. It was like, but it's
water.
One of those
Cemetery
and water. Yeah, cemeteries and water, and it's like never really thought about it like that, but yeah, everyone's always going to need water for something, and then like you're going to need somewhere to put your dead.
Yeah, exactly.
But that was the whole plan he lays out for Mr. Smith. Find an open grave. They find the open grave, and he's like, stand here, you shoot me, I fall in, put a little dirt on me. The next morning, a casket gets laid on me. And I think this is something that I've seen other movies where they're killing someone, they hide them in an open grave or something like that, so that the body, the casket just laid on it. So I think they get there and they do the scene there with killing him. And so Mr. Smith pulls out his gun, he goes to fire him, shoots him. Mr. Brooks, so I'll close my eyes. He's sitting there with his eyes closed, and he goes to fire, and the gun doesn't go off.
Yeah.
And it's like, he's like, what? He goes to shoot again. And then Mr. Brooks, this is the moment you're like, oh shit, something's about to happen. Because he's like got his head tilted down, slowly opens his eyes, and it's like that. Oh shit, what's he gonna do?
Takes over.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like whatever. And he goes into the whole explanation. He's like, I thought I really wanted you to do this, but at the moment when you pulled the trigger, I realized I'm gonna have a grandchild, and I really want to be there for it. So I even brought another gun after he talks about he went into his place and he bent the firing pin so it wouldn't work. And so it's like, and he's like, I even brought another gun for you to use, but I've decided. And you see him kind of like walking around and kind of shifting, almost like boxers or cage fighters, like kind of shifting and work in the middle and the sides to get him around. And he picks up the shovel, and I guess this is Dane Cook's oh my god, panic. He's like freaking out, trying to fire the gun, trying to figure out what's going on, that it's not working. And I think he smacks him in the head with a shovel. And the kill scene was even now, after seeing this movie for a while, seeing the final like kill scene of Dane Cook's character is just like, oh shit, yeah, just shovel, like just takes a shovel like a baseball bat and just drills it across his throat and just takes him out. And
that's when he lets them know, hey, before I was a thumbprint killer, I was many different things too. So
oh yeah,
it's like what like what all was he before then?
Yeah, it's like I was a lot of different things, and I've killed a lot of different people, and it like, so it's, yeah, it really lets you know like the reason why he's so methodical on everything is he's been doing this for a long time in a lot of different ways.
Oh yeah.
So it really shows you how that character of Mr. Brooks was really built for so long. But yeah, it definitely, that was all really cool. Really twist there at the end of like, what was going on. And it kind of leads even to why he had all of Mr. Smith's stuff packed up and gone. Because it really kind of looks like to pin everything on him now going forward.
Oh yeah.
But and he even explained that to him. He's like, as this time, you're now the thumbprint killer because you left DNA at the scene of the last murder when you pissed yourself. And now they're going to test that DNA and you're going to be the thumbprint killer. So that was all really interesting, in that scene there too.
So at the end, because Dane Cook makes the point that he says, I'll let your family know what really, who the real thumbprint killer is and everything else, blah, blah. Yep. And, I think this is about the point that I kind of knew on the interstate when you made that comment to him and all. I think that was the point that I realized, Mr. Brooks isn't going to die, that Mr. Smith's not going to kill him. Because at this point, he could have just taken the car and just crashed it, somewhere going 80 miles an hour, killed them both. And it still would have been on Dane Cook, and it just would have been Mr. Brooks. Mr. Brooks would still came out as the kind of the hero because it would have been like he was kidnapped by the thumbprint killer and was able to rid of himself and the thumbprint killer. So he would have gone down as like the hero. So I think it was like that point that I was like, when they got to the cemetery, I was like, he's not going to die right here. Like, it's just not going to happen.
I didn't think it was going to happen. I don't think I didn't think it was going to happen solely more because he emptied out the apartment and he was doing all this stuff to set him up as it was. And his whole plan was to find a way for Mr. Smith to basically erase the thumbprint killer and him, and so he could move past it. Yeah. And the killing thing was that set up there. I really didn't think it was going to happen because honestly, I think if it did, it would have ruined the entire movie. For Kevin Costner's, like we said, it's we're rooting for the villain at this point. Right. So for Dane Cook to have actually killed him there, it'd been like, wait a minute, what the hell? Y'all had this great thing going on, and then you just we fired all our writers and someone else came in and just he kills him.
Well, it starts a whole new younger, thumbprint killer.
Yeah.
It's kind of thought because we'll get to it now. We'll get to it now or get to it later. But this was really meant to be a trilogy. Mr. Brooks was actually supposed to have been a trilogy. Yeah. It just never quite happened. Or I don't know why, but it just never quite happened then. And,
it's interesting. I mean, I really it's one of those movies I think got underrated. Obviously we didn't talk about the actual ratings and stuff that
not yet.
yeah, but I think it's one of those movies that's truly underrated that if I had heard that they were doing a sequel of it, I'd have been pretty interesting, but at the same time I think it would have been a lot harder to do a sequel for this. Yeah. Because you kind of, at this point, who Mr. Brooks is, what he's doing. And you almost would have had to take it to a point of more him and his daughter kind of thing.
That would have been interesting.
I feel like.
Well, bring us on home with this last part of the movie then.
Yeah, so the last part here, we see all this. She's thinking that Mr. Smith is actually the thumbprint killer. He goes home. Or no. So he's at a restaurant having coffee, and he sees this girl's red flip phone. Leaves, steals the phone. He calls the detective, and he's just asking her questions. She's thinking it's Mr. Smith, and she's like, you don't sound the same. He's like, oh, I have a little bit of a cold. And he's like, tell me, why did you become a detective? Why'd you do this when you're family when you have all this money? And I think he kind of alludes there that he's the one that sent her to Meeks. Did you like my gift? I think, or something he says.
Yeah, I think you're right. He does say something like that.
Yeah, and so she basically tells him that she wanted to earn her own way, and her father always wanted a son, was always kind of disappointed of her, so she wanted to do something good. And he kind of talks to her, and she's like, well, now you told me where you were. You would say where you were. He's like, I'm on top of a building, and then throws the phone off and destroys the phone. Right. And then she's like, that wasn't Mr. Smith. That was, she said that wasn't him. That was someone else. So she kind of has an idea now too, that while they're pinning the thumbprint killer on Mr. Smith, she's like, the thumbprint killer is still out there. And she kind of knows it now.
Well, I think she would have been disappointed. Like you talking about the disappointment earlier, she probably would have been disappointed if it was Mr. Smith, because I think she initially got her idea of, probably the Mr. Smith. She probably has her own, or Mr. Brooks. I mean, the thumbnail, thumbprint killer. She probably had her own thought process of what kind of person he would be like, and this Mr. Smith just did not meet up to that, anyways.
Oh yeah, it's Mr. Smith was too sloppy in a sense of like even her meeting him at the apartment, being that close. Like he didn't meet the profile. I think she thought he knew something, but she didn't know this. And then when everything else got pieced together, it was kind of like, I don't know, like he fits for based on the evidence we're seeing on this one, but she didn't like him for it.
Right.
So it was interesting. I think that was a cool part. And I think, like you're saying, like if it was supposed to be a trilogy or something like that, that could even build into it more.
On her face that comes across whenever she's like, it wasn't the same voice, and she has kind of a smile because she knows it's like that wasn't the killer. Somebody else is. I get to now look for the the real killer.
Yeah, I know that someone's still out there. Like we might in the newspapers might be saying that this is over, but like I know that this guy's still out there. So like she's gonna like try to make it her life work to find this dude now. But you have that, and then you see him go home, and like I mentioned before, you had the scene where he gets his milk and he goes and gives his daughter a kiss. So again, you're kind of seeing the same thing at night. He's getting his milk, he's drinking it. He's kind of like falling back into the Mr. Brooks, man of the year, owning his box factory, and he goes upstairs, sees the light on in his daughter's room, goes in, leans over to give her a kiss. At this point, and here's another twist part that like I didn't see. I still jump when I see this part. Was goes to give her the kiss. She leans over and she opens her eyes, turns to him, sees him, and then out of nowhere pulls scissors and just jabs him in the jugular.
Yeah.
And it's like just blood going everywhere, and you got the music going, and she's just kind of like watching him die. And he's kind of like starts trying to reach for her, blood spraying all over the walls and stuff. And I'm not someone for like the blood gore kind of movies, which this movie had just enough of it. It had a couple parts of it, and it was just enough for the suspense killer kind of thing. It wasn't overdone necessarily or anything like that, I don't feel, but he does that, and then he falls down and dies. And again, to where the first part we mentioned about the glasses, like there she goes again. She pulls the glasses off of his dead body and she's putting them on, blood all over her hands and stuff. And she puts the glasses on and she's just sitting there like, I'm in charge of the family now, kind of thing. So that whole part was just a complete like, oh shit, kind of moment. And then all of a sudden, then it switches to realizing that was Mr. Brooks dreaming. At that part, and his wife is waking him up. But it shows his fear knowing that his daughter is a killer and has the same crap in her head that he has. And going back to that scene with the glasses of, oh, I could just take over the business, Daddy. What happens when you die? Kind of thing. It's like, oh shit, well, now I got to watch out for my daughter. It might kill me. And that even goes back to a point there where Marshall asked him that. Yeah. Marshall asked him that.
So interesting you say that, because at one point in time, whenever they were doing this movie, the part where he gets stabbed in the neck, the part where he gets stabbed in the neck was actually going to be the end of the movie, and it was going to be part 2 was going to be Mrs. Brooks, his daughter. And then for whatever reason, honestly, I think it's because Kevin Costner liked the character so much. He was a huge fan of this movie, and one of his top favorite characters. He said it was a perfect script that was written, and I think in his mind he thought, if we're going to do a second one, we're going to do it with me doing it. So they decided to go with that instead of the other way around.
Yeah, and it's I think it's one of those things too where it's I was reading on one place that it's IMDb. One of their things is this role was actually written with Kevin Costner in mind.
Oh yeah, what was it? What movie was it he saw? The Dancing with Wolves or something like that? I don't remember what it was. But it was something that he saw with him in it. and he really liked. He
Yeah.
said, "Kevin Costner's my guy."
Yeah. So they knew this. Yeah. So there was a good bit of stuff there that was really interesting about it, and him in the role. I didn't know that was supposed to originally be the first ending of it. I didn't know it was supposed to be a trilogy either. I just always saw it as the first movie. But yeah, that was definitely cool.
They wanted it to be. William Hunt wanted it to be too, a part of one, and they just all kind of wanted to be. And I think what the idea would have been was, probably, I'm taking a guess because William Hunt wanted it to be too, is that after she would have stabbed him, more than likely he would have, appeared talking to her. You know what I mean? And now he was having, Marshall, was with her, little Jedi stuff.
Yeah, something. Well, and it's even more going to that. We don't know because we've never followed her as the main voice and protagonist necessarily. So we don't know. She might have her own person going on in the background, and it might be, maybe it's a thing if there was a second movie, if it developed into that, you can see like Marshall and her person talking, them having a debate about what they should do with the kid. But yeah, that was definitely something.
And maybe that would have been it. Maybe that's what the trilogy would have been. Maybe, first is Mr. Brooks, second is Mrs. Brooks, and then the third is the child, her child becoming a new serial killer. And then that wraps it all up as the child at, being the end of it. I don't know. Throwing it out there, nobody knows.
There's so much that you could do with it, I think, in that sense. But I think that if you actually had Kevin Costner, his character, Mr. Brooks, actually died there, and you had his daughter be the next scene,
it would have never made it big.
It wouldn't have been a big movie because I don't think, one, at the time she was still a relatively young actress. It doesn't look like she did a lot of stuff major movie wise. It looked like she went to more TV roles. It wouldn't have had the same feel, in a sense there. And I almost feel like you would have needed to like the point you made about that not being, or that being the original ending, and then that Kevin Costner being like, no, I want to be in the second one too. I feel like you would have had to have the second movie almost be like she went and committed another murder, confided in him, and then he covers it up, but then like takes her under his wing and like teaches her the proper things to do if she's going to feed this addiction. Which, another thing that at the end that is really funny is that he's going to like AA. He tells Marshall at the end, I'm going back to the meetings. He goes to AA for his homicidal tendencies. He's like, he just stands up and he's like, I'm an addict. He's like, he's talking about his murder tendencies, his murder cravings, like he's an alcoholic.
That's how they got William Hunt to get to do this movie, right?
Yeah. I was just looking at the.
He's a serial killer that goes to see that is in AA, and William Hunt's like laughing. He was like, I gotta do this movie.
Yeah, exactly. And it's even in that scene, William Hurt's his character is making fun of Mr. Brooks. He's like, you're such a fucking hypocrite. Like in the movie, in the scene, like, so it makes sense that's why he wanted to do this movie. He thought it was hilarious. And then it gets, again, like you're saying before about him kind of referencing Dane Cook's actual stuff. This is him actually like making fun of this whole thing of like a serial killer going to AA meetings. Yeah. Which was funny.
But that calmed him down. Apparently, kept him under control for a couple of years. I guess it worked somewhat.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's you really see that throughout the movie that Mr. Brooks is a man and a person, knows that killing is wrong. He knows he's not right. He doesn't want to do it. He has an inner turmoil about it. But like you really see it in the first murder when he kills the young couple, that like after he kills them, like he's overtaken with like ecstasy of like he probably just nutted in his pants kind of thing. Like like he's just overtaken and he's like, this great feeling of joy and release when he does it. So you would equate it to an addict when they, if they're doing drugs or something like that, they shoot up and it's like that instant feeling of like euphoria that, it's hitting their body.
Yeah.
But after a while of not having it, you start getting the withdrawals. And I think his withdrawals is Marshall talking in his ear about it and egging him on.
Which is kind of cool, that his name is, speaking of that, because we're at the end of it, his name is Marshall, and, the definition of Marshall is, the military and all that would also is, the leader, the one that the head leader, the, overall, the one you listen to.
Yeah.
So them picking the name Marshall was for a reason,
There's a lot of stuff like I mentioned with the light on Marshall's face when he was being a voice of reason. Like, I feel like there's so many little things that I still have not recognized that, like the name picking and the way that they do things. Like, there's probably so much in there. I mean, it kind of gives me a sense of like the Sixth Sense. Like every scene that they were together, like Bruce Willis never talks to anyone else other side the kid. And anytime there's like a ghost or something going around, there's always red. Like there's the red balloon, there's a person wearing the red dress. Like there's always the red in the scenes where that stuff is happening as well. Like there's little
now.
Yeah, it's like there's all this little stuff that happens during that movie, and I feel like there's stuff like that hidden in Mr. Brooks that is so subtle at times that you might not realize what it's foreshadowing and stuff like that. And like I know earlier I was talking to Tucker about it, and one thing he said about the movie is that like it's really great that this is the first time that you've seen it because you have that such a fresh perspective of it and the suspense and not knowing. Because like what he was saying is, after you've seen it once, you kind of know the twists that are coming. So you're kind of more prepared, and like then you start seeing some of these things. You're like, okay, well, yeah, I know what's going to happen. I know what he's doing, and it kind of it loses some of it if you go into it remembering everything that happens. But if you start watching scene by scene and just kind of looking at the individual things, yeah, it's like you start recognizing some little things. And but yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. So it was. I find it really interesting, like movies like this, to go back and watch and find those little clues and hints and stuff that are like thrown in.
Yeah.
But
well,
yeah, no, it's.
Before we get to our ratings and we'll get this wrapped up, we do this thing called Triple Lindy.
Yep.
And it's where, you know about that, right?
Yep. So we did it last week. Yeah.
Right. So it's the one thing that is just totally unbelievable in the movie. So I'll let you go first. What would be your Triple Lindy moment of this?
There's a couple. Now that I go back and I watch it, there is a couple parts of it. and I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think of what is the key one that I think is the biggest thing that isn't realistic. And I think it would the one that I'm going to say is I think it would have been easily fixed also. I find it unbelievable that a serial killer that was known from past years, when they recommitted another murder, that the feds wouldn't immediately have jumped on it. And that a local police detective would have been the one doing this whole hunt. Especially even knowing that she caught a previous serial killer. Yeah. And I don't find that realistic. I feel like the moment that a serial killer, details of that came out again and they knew it, feds would have been there right away. And being on the West Coast and in like a major city like Portland, I feel like there probably is a federal, agency, FBI, whatever, like pretty close by. So
definitely.
I say that I think that's the Triple Lindy. I think that that's not realistic that you would have had a local police detective this entire time doing this movie, because this isn't like some movies where it's like 1-2 days. Like you see that this movie takes place over like a week or so easily. And I think that's the thing, but I say it could have easily been fixed is they could have just changed her. Instead of being Portland PD, you could have made her FBI, and it would have fixed that whole.
You're right. Thing. She could have been there on the because she was there already anyways for Binks or whatever his name is. She was already there for that. Yep. So I mean, it's I agree with you on that that kind of doesn't make sense. The case went cold only 2 years ago. From the movie standpoint, the case had only went cold for a couple of years. So that detective that would have originally been on the case, that was originally behind it, or the team, the task force, I'm sure that they had that. So the task force that was on it, would have been around. That would have been the first person you would have called, and just boom, 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 all your stuff would be back up on bulletin boards.
Yep.
And she's just going about this like as if it was just just a yesterday killing, just a random killing. Even though they know for a fact. Yeah, it doesn't really. It's not holding up too much. She's doing it all by herself too. She's not having a task force with her with a big time serial killer like this. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't make much sense. So
the only thing is she had the one partner guy that was following her around because of Meeks.
Because the other lady put him with him. Yeah.
Yeah, and even then, you see so many times where she's out doing her own thing, like when she shows up at Mr. Smith's apartment. So like, she's not even caring about that guy. She's still just doing everything on her own. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the one thing for me. Like that's probably the biggest thing outside of like, the van door not shutting and stuff like that. Like that's the big thing overarching throughout the entire movie, that it's just, I don't find that feasible. I think like, and first of all, with it being if it was a brand new serial killer, I could find it a little bit more plausible, but being that they know this guy was a serial killer, he's reemerged, like FBI would have already been involved. He, as soon as he reemerged, they would have been there. There'd have been no, I'm going to buy you a couple days from the feds. Like feds would have showed up and been like, nope, this is our case, done. Like,
they never mentioned up anything about his other killings, like how many he had or anything like that, did they? They just said he did it more romantic poses with the couples.
Yeah. In the past, it was more romantic poses, holding each other, stuff like that. Whereas, this pose was, she was laying on top of his junk, basically, with her head just above his crotch, I think is where the positioning was.
Hand on top of her head.
Yeah, so it was more of a provocative pose, where normally it was more of a loving romantic pose. But so it was obvious that it wasn't like just one or two. Like there were several other killings. They knew he was it was just that he disappeared for 2 years while he was doing his AA meetings. So it was like, I think that for me, that's my triple Lindy. That's the big one that I find not as plausible.
Yeah, I think if I gotta go with my triple Lindy, I gotta say it's probably the shootout incident that happened, and it looked like he got shot in his left arm. Was it?
Yeah.
Then he turns around and he aims his gun with the same arm, and he keeps getting shot. A couple of times. Gets shot in the leg, and it's just like, how is this guy? Still holding up his gun. How is he still making almost accurate shots? I don't know. That one was the one that got me. It was a little shootout scene. And I was like, I'm not big on this. It would have been better if whenever she was in the hallway and she was getting to the room and they came out, she would have saw them come out the door and pull the gun on them. To me, that would have been better than having the whole shootout. Was her pull the gun on him first,
So I debated on the shootout as being my triple Lindy as well. And the only reason I went with the other one was because it was overarching throughout the entire movie.
Yeah.
The shootout, and this is something I find it's so common with gunfights in movies. And it's funny because IMDb actually has it listed as a goof in the movie, is that Meeks is firing a Colt M1911, which has a 7-round magazine, and he fires it 23 times without reloading. So it's like, and that's something that you see so much in movies, especially older movies now, where it's like, they have a 7-round magazine or a 15-round magazine, but they just fired off like 500 rounds and never reloaded. And
right.
There's the illusion, there's the movie magic and disbelief. Oh, maybe he reloaded while he was off screen for a second or whatever, blah, 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 blah. But it was like, this one, that firefight scene was so fast. And like you said, he's getting shot, and it's like the old Jason, serial killer movies. They're getting shot all over the place and just functioning like nothing happened to them.
But as far as the movie magic goes with it, though, like I feel like he was just going out. Like I don't feel like he was carrying extra rounds in his pockets. You know what I mean? Like he just had what he had on him, and that was it.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is him. He's not John Wick, right? He didn't just load up and have like magazines taped to his entire body.
Right.
He probably killed someone, stole this gun, whatever. He had this one gun with the magazine that was in it.
Right.
And that's probably what he had. And you could say the same thing, because even her with her gun, she never reloads. Even if she had 20 something rounds, she still fired way more than that, because as they start like getting to run away, you see her, she's just firing at the ceiling, shooting out all the lights and stuff like that so that she can move and they can't see her. So like she's firing like crazy, they're firing like crazy. Like there was a ton of rounds that went off in that scene.
Pandemonium.
Yeah, it's just, it was a firefight. So there was just so much there that it's like, it's not as believable because of that. It makes a great movie scene, but for anyone that shoots guns or knows guns, or I mean, I have friends from the military and stuff, and obviously Tucker probably would have said the same thing, being a police officer, knowing guns. It's like he probably would have seen the guns, like, I know exactly what gun that guy's shooting, and I know it doesn't have that many rounds.
Right.
So, but yeah, like you said, like him getting shot in the shoulder, like, I mean, I've had a like inflamed rotator cuff and stuff. Like, dude, when that's there, you're not lifting your arm. Like, I can't imagine having a bullet, gone through my arm. I'm not lifting your arm in that sense.
Exactly. It's like the whole thing right there. They could have done without it. Like I said, they could have done that differently than what they did. Does it take away from the movie? No, it doesn't take away from the movie at all. It doesn't hurt it one bit.
No, it doesn't. It's like I said, it's a triple indie. It's not really believable, but I feel like it was, if you had literally just left it with just those rounds that they actually would have had, it would have been a very short scene. You wouldn't have been able to have them going down the hallway or down the stairwell and getting shot. And yeah, like it would have been in the hallway where like she gets shot at. They fire a couple rounds back and forth. She drills him in the head. He goes down, and then she chases, or she drills the girl in the head and then chases him down the stairs and gets him. Like, it would have been super quick, not a lot of firefight, not a lot of blowing stuff up with the lights and everything. So it's movie magic in that scene. But yeah, like you said, that scene's probably not realistic.
It's also the whole thing with like, top it all off. One of the other things I thought about too, so that was my triple ending. But one of the other things I had also thought about too was that, like, here she is. She's the number one suspect of the man, her ex-husband's death. She just assaulted another officer, ran out the door, and yet the whole police department's not after her butt. You know what I mean? Like, they would have had helicopters in the air and everything, and like, I don't know. It's just my thinking is that, like, she's looking really suspicious, that she would attack and take off running,
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, she does warn him of like, you're better off not calling this in, and you never saw me. And like, she does do that whole scene and talk with him, but I can't imagine him actually doing that.
Right.
Like, as a police officer, like I can't imagine them,
He came right on in. He said, I mean, we already know you threatened him. I don't know if I can trust you. He even said, I don't even know if I can trust you. And then her, assaulting him, and then taking off and saying, you better not call it in. You didn't ever see me. I'd be like, well, shit, I really don't trust you now.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff there. And the whole, you threatened him. I'm not an attorney, so I'm sure they could twist the words and stuff like that. But like, I don't find what she said to be a threat. Like, it would make me happy if you walked outside and got hit by a truck. Like, it's not like she said, I'm going to push you in front of a truck. No. Like, that'd have been a threat. I don't think saying what would make me happy is if you got hit by a truck.
But see, they use it to put up their, the restraining order, some more stuff against her, and so, and all the other officer knows is what's on file. And that's, she made a threat. Whether he doesn't know what it really was said, but he probably knows that she had made a threat on his life. And she has a restraining order against her, and now all of a sudden this guy's dead. That
Yeah, so him and his attorney are now dead.
Yeah, exactly.
but and it was the thumb. They say it was the thumbprint killer, and you're the one who knows the most about it, so you could have easily framed it,
Yep.
and all that stuff, and they put it out there. So
Yeah.
yeah, there was a lot. There's a lot to unpack, even with her and that stuff too.
All right. Well, let's get to our rankings, man. Our ratings and rankings and all.
Well, I'll let you go first on this one since it's your first time.
Yeah, definitely. So, so here's my overall thing with that, man. I went into this not knowing what to expect and all. Man, I'll tell you what, I would love to see somebody like Netflix or Hulu or somebody like that pick this up and make this into a series. I think that would be awesome, especially now that so much, serial killer stuff is so huge right now. It would be awesome to see, one of them pick it up and make it into a series. You can backtrack Mr. Brooks' whole life, and go into his youth and all that and find out, what drove him to it, his first sets of killings and all that. I think it would be awesome. I feel like this was a good foothold. Like I said, they originally wanted to be a trilogy. It would have been, to me, fabulous if they would have turned it into a trilogy. So knowing that originally this was supposed to be the first part, and man, it was just, I would have never thought Kevin Costner about this role. And the fact that it's like he's the villain, and yet you don't hate him. You know what I mean? Like, you're just like, I love this character, It's like you just, at the end of it, you're like, yeah, please say he doesn't get killed at the cemetery. I want to see him keep going, So with that, man, it sold me big time into it. So I got to give this a one beer, man. This is one of my one beer movies.
Yeah, I didn't know about the whole trilogy and stuff until you mentioned it, but I'm right there with you about like Netflix picking this up, like do an early Mr. Brooks kind of thing, like in his college years, or you could easily make it like you start out the first episode of like showing his childhood where he was a little twisted, and I think it'd be hilarious to have like a young Marshall like walking around as a kid with him, like kick the cat kind of thing, like just that stuff going through as a child, showing where he was kind of twisted, or maybe even like they put him in therapy and made it worse because they did like electric shock on him, or who knows, like you said, there's so many possibilities to show him as a young kid growing up, like his early stage of a serial killer where he almost gets caught or something, and then that's where he starts getting so methodical about stuff. And yeah, I agree with you there that there's a lot of potential. And like I said, I first suggested this movie a while back when I wrote in to y'all when I was just listening, but I love this movie. I think it's great. After watching it a couple times, like to me, it's not necessarily a one beer, but it's still to me a 1.5 at least. Like it's a great movie. It's one of these movies that if I see it on TV or I see it on Netflix or whatever, like I'm watching it. And even with this one, when I thought I originally owned it, and I'm looking through all my DVDs and shit and everything I had, and I couldn't find it. So I was like, whatever. I just went to Amazon and bought it because I'm like, I'll watch this again. I absolutely know I'll watch this again.
Right.
So this is one of my favorite movies, and it's Kevin Costner, like you said, I think he does such a good role, and plays such a good role, and and him, the interactions and everything with him and Marshall, going back and forth, and them laughing together and having fights and like whatever, like that dynamic of do that stuff was great. And then to be able to play it off like there was nothing going on in the other scene. But yeah, no, I love this movie. I think it's a great one. It's one of the reasons I suggested it to y'all originally. But
but it's a good one, man. Like you said,
yep.
I was totally shocked by it. I didn't know what to expect when I came in. I know I missed it back in the day, and it was just kind of one of those movies where I was like, Kevin Costner playing a serial killer. I don't know about that, man. And just like you said, Dane Cook being a serious role, I was just like, I can't see it, So it really, really shocked me, and I was like, this is really so much. I mean, it was so good, Like this is one of my favorites. If they ever do make this into a series, I can promise you, I'll make sure I'm going to watch it before I watch the series, just kind of catch up, on it and all that. Hopefully they'll do it. I'm hoping Netflix, somebody picks it up.
Yeah, someone listen to this and do it. But yeah, no, it was definitely great there. It's definitely a good one.
But, all right, man. Well, you about to wrap this up, man? You ready for this?
Yeah. I'll let you do the wrap up because I don't know all the socials.
You can find us on social media. You can, the Guys Reviewed, podcast. Just look us up. Find us on Facebook, social media, any listening device. You can find us on Apple Music, wherever we're at. It's super easy to find us. But this is Chris and Daniel, and thanks for watching the Guys Review. All right, let's call it. I'll let them know when to.
Yeah,
Well,
give him a little dead time there to cut it. Yeah,
exactly. That's what I want to do.
Yeah, I got to ask you though. Did you watch the Gary, the tennis coach?
Yes, I did actually. I did watch that.
Just as a quick, what would you have rated that? I don't know if you listened to last week's podcast or not.
What would I rate that? So here's the thing about that movie. It's one of those kind of a stereotypical movie for that time period. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't bad, per se. It was pretty funny. That was one of the movies that Trey recommended. I don't know what it is about whatever his name is, Shawn Michael Smith, whatever that guy's name is.
Scott, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what it is with him, man, but he really likes his movies, though. So that's just his thing. And but across the board, I probably would have went with maybe a 4 to a 3.5.
Okay.
Would probably been as high as I would have gave it because it's super creepy, with him in that relationship. You could tell from the very beginning that something was going to happen with that young girl and him at some point in that movie.
Yeah.
And it was just really creepy.
That was a big topic in us talking about it last week. And that was a big thing because it was like you said, throughout the movie, you kind of saw that there was going to be something there. There was inappropriate behavior. And like Tucker said, it was there was a lot of just grooming behavior throughout it. And it was one of those things. And it was just, I said personally, I started watching it and I had to stop and then restart it later because I was I told Tucker right after the first, when I first did it, I'm like, dude, I can't even give this 5 beers. It's a keg. It was that cringy at first. Cause the first 30-minute intro was just horrible.
Yeah.
And there was just so much there, but
it did it had a few funny parts in it, especially the part where he's down in Tijuana or wherever it is that he's at school and he's going to take one for the girl,
Yeah. Well, that was actually one of the things I mentioned afterwards is as a secondary triple indie. I'm who the hell that's been in college doesn't know what a donkey show is and would take the place of the girl?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was weird because so me, Tucker, and Steven all rated it 4.5, and Trey gave it a 1 beer.
That's great.
And the whole thing about the daughter, we were talking about. He is I know that girl is of age as an actress, and that's what I'm using my imagination that she's of age in the movie. And I'm it doesn't work that way. Your imagination's supposed to say that she's underage in this movie, and you know that. So
I was surprised he didn't have a thing for the midget mom.
Well, that was the thing too. We kind of says at first when he was dropping her off at home and he had the condoms and stuff, my first thought was he was going to try to hook up with the midget mom because he, Trey even mentioned at the point when we were talking about it, he imagined a scene with her where he was the husband, he was dressed as the husband in the stalls and she came in and opened her shirt. But yeah, so it was that. And then there's the Spanish teacher, but the Spanish teacher, that was some of the funnier stuff for me when she was I like the sexy fingers and, stuff like that. Even the hooker stripper scene with the kid was not as bad, but it was still there. There was some funny moments.
Yeah, it was super awkward with the girl. I mean, just like you said, it was from the time he sat down on the bench and was talking to her, it was you were just this dude's a pedo. And then he, still her dad goes, wait, anything you need me to do, I'll do, and then it's they're in the van and she finds his condoms and she gets them out and she's playing with them. He's just talking to her nonchalant. It's
Yeah.
just like, dude, just reeks of pedo.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it does. And we talked about like Sean William Scott. Like it seems like that was his movie and the things that he got stuck in. Like it's all of his movies after a while were like Life as Stifler afterwards.
That's
After
very
American
true.
Pie. And I laugh and I kind of look at like another good role that he had was in Role Models. He was in Role Models, and I'm like, I envision
That was a
that.
good movie. I like
Yeah.
that movie. Actually.
Which, funny enough, the guy that became the head coach after Randy Quaid's character died was also in Role Models.
Oh, really?
He was the creepy guy in Sturdy Wings that like had a thing for Jane Lynch's character.
I'm about to watch Role Models again.
Yeah, but
Watch that one.
he was in that one as well. But it was just, I find Role Models to be more of like Stifler after high school and stuff.
Yeah.
Like I could see Stifler being like going around in a Minotaur costume, telling kids not to do drugs, and then, being behind the school smoking pot. Like I could see that as Stifler after high school. This one was if Stifler's parents were like meth dealers, and it was just completely off the rails. But I feel like I felt like that was so over the top of a movie, and
Yeah.
that it was so forced at times. It wasn't just Sean William Scott's natural comedic stuff at times.
Well, no, because it's like it rode in between the level of like, is he an idiot or is he not an idiot? So is he or just an idiot savant? I don't know. It's one of those like you didn't know he kind of played stupid at times, and then at other times it was like, well, he's showing a little bit of intelligence, But then again, it's like no, now he's going back to being an idiot again, So
Yeah. Well, I mean that plays into little things about even like the Spanish teacher. They said she's from Argentina, but then he kept saying Portuguese.
Yeah.
And throughout the movie, so it's like he is an idiot in a sense. Like he's an idiot, but like you said, there's moments where he is like it shows that he's not. So
he knows some Spanish.
Yeah.
But
well,
he doesn't know it well, but he does know some words. But he doesn't know it what he's saying though.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, it was an odd one. But yeah, definitely we were curious what you were going to rate it because I think they said you have someone who's 15, you have a daughter or something that's 15 or something like that was going to start driving.
Yeah, dude.
So it's like right around that same age as that other girl. It's like, how are you going to react as like a father and stuff that's, to that kind of situation?
Yeah, I mean, no, it was super creepy. Yeah, it was one of those like, this is just not right, on a creepy level. But it just, I don't know, man. It was just,
one of the things that we said is that if they had moved this out of high school and moved it into like junior college or something like that, like freshman aged college kids, it would have been completely different. Like that groomer, yeah, it would have been completely different, and it still wouldn't have been a great movie. Like, still wouldn't have rated it a 1 star, but like I probably would have been closer to like the 3, 3, 2.5 or so at that point. But it was definitely.
But you're gonna find out, man. Hendrix has got some unique taste, we'll say.
Trust me, from listening to you guys, I have learned that.
Yeah.
I have definitely learned like the beer reviews and that kind of stuff. I'm like, man, I gotta bring up some Florida brews for y'all. see how that rates. But
right.
No, I don't know if you've listened to the fireside chat one that me, Steven, and that. So
yeah, I'm gonna listen to that.
I'm gonna ask this, and I'll ask you this. I'll tell you, but you can go listen to that and hear Steven and Tucker's responses. But I asked them because right after like y'all first started the podcast, and the stories about Miss Anita came up, and everything. I told Tucker this, and I said you need to ask this on like one of the next recordings, and he never did it. So I brought it up. I'm like, I'm really disappointed in y'all that nobody has asked you if you at least got a gummer out of it.
Hey,
So
you know, she's still around, man. I'm shocked. She's still around. I just don't
so
ever
that
see her.
she sees you just like Herbert looking through the window.
Dude, you know that Troy. Hey, listen, that story is 100% true, man. I kid you not. That's like if you ever talk to my wife, she will tell you. Like she called me up on my phone. I put it on the speaker, and like everything that she said, like we were talking about, you know, her saying for me come to her place and all. Like my wife heard every bit of that, and I was like, holy crap, you know, this is insane.
I believe it. I believe when y'all say this stuff. I'm just like, it makes for a good show. But yeah, there's so many questions that could be asked there. I'm just like, did you at least get a gummer? And they wanted nothing to do with the question, so it was a funny response.
That is great.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well,
I will warn you, if you watch the YouTube, avert your eyes at times. If you watch the recording of it.
All right, we'll do, man. Well,
All right.
I'm gonna I'll hit Steven up. Let him. I guess I'll hit Steven up. Let him know we're done and all. But I guess I'll see you next week.
I told Steven and Tucker I'm good with it. Y'all want me to come back? I'm good. I don't do anything on Sunday nights, so.
Sounds good to me, man. It was
All
really
right.
fun, man. It was good talking with you tonight, man.
Good talking to you too, man.
All right, bye, bud.
Later.